introduce this damn thing. And I just needed $50,000. I assumed everybody was telling the truth on the internet. And so I Googled, how do I make money online? You got to get Bitcoin. It's digital gold. Claire, get over it.
Hey, we're back. We've got Brad Mills. Jeez, how do I introduce this man? He's a podcaster, raconteur, writer, investor, Bitcoin at the core of everything. Brad, welcome. It's great to have you.
Fan of Star Trek.
Fan of Star Trek. Welcome, sir. It's fantastic to have you on. It's been a while trying to get you on, and I'm glad that I finally managed to get your time, and I really appreciate it. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm very popular. You're welcome.
So let's kick it off with just kind of like the simple things. Intro. Let's start with Bitcoin. I mean, that's why we're here. Tell us about your journey into Bitcoin, and what it is that kind of brought you to where we are right now. As you said, you're quite famous. People obviously appreciate your banter and your insights. But how did it start for you? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I have many leather-bound books. What's the audience like for your show?
So mostly degens, but I think I'd like to think that even though there is kind of like this degen lighter side to things, I think we've got some thinkers as well, and people who do appreciate kind of like, yeah. I think it's kind of like a mixture of everything, really.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So
Well,
you can go deep if you want to.
Well, just I kind of have a inner FOMO sapien as well, so I definitely understand that mindset. And actually, so I got into Bitcoin in 2011, and it was I was an entrepreneur. I was like a move fast, break things, wannabe entrepreneur. And back in like 2005, I actually had written a movie, and it was a cheesy 80s horror movie that I wrote, and I just needed $50,000 to make the movie. And I didn't have any money, and I didn't have any schooling or training or anything. So I was like, how do I make $50,000 so I can make a movie? I just really wanted to do that. And so I Googled, how do I make money online? And that's my business school, basically. It's getting scammed by, I don't know if you remember back in like 2005 era internet, it was a lot of like high yield investment programs, straight up like Ponzi schemes on the internet, and a lot of network marketing, magic pills and stuff. And
Yeah.
fill out this survey, and we'll send you back, send us $50 and we'll send you back $100. Auto surfs were very popular, like invest $10,000 into this new investment advertising technology business, and then you put up your website, and then you surf everybody else's website once a day, and then you get 12% of your money every day. It's new internet magic technology for advertising. Google's making money, you could too.
Yeah.
So that was my christening into how to make money online, was like falling for the first page of Google results. So it's probably web crawler results back in those days, I don't remember.
Yeah.
But just getting scammed a lot. Tons of like online casino scams, like, we'll show you how to use the martingale strategy to milk bonuses at online casinos and you'll be a millionaire in no time. So I was like ripped off a lot. And I actually got introduced, because of all that shit, I got introduced to eGold. And eGold was this online payment processing method that was like an alternative to PayPal, where you could use gold. So it was like electronic gold.
Mm-hmm.
And I had an account at eGold because a lot of these Ponzi schemes, you couldn't use traditional payment rails or PayPal because you get the accounts frozen. And they were using this shady service, eGold. And so I had an account there, and it kind of like introduced me to the idea of gold. And then I started reading books by, Robert Kiyosaki, and listening to Peter Schiff and all those greats that sort of educated young millennials on why fiat money is the devil. and taxes are unconstitutional, and you should just own Bitcoin or own gold. So it got me into the mindset of thinking like, oh, I should start a business and I should own gold and stuff like that. And then I eventually got, like, school of hard knocks. I learned all the lessons of what's a scam. Don't be too naive believing all the narratives that people are telling you on the internet. Because I grew up Mormon, by the way, so I assumed everybody was telling the truth on the internet, just
Oh,
like they
wow.
were in church.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, if they're telling me I can make 12% a day, I can make 12% a day. This is amazing. So I had to kind of like shed some beliefs about the world by getting scammed a lot and learning a lot of lessons. But then that kind of led me to a path of actually figuring out, just be, continue to take shots and continue to. I was reading a lot of mindset books, How to Win Friends and Influence People, As a Man Thinketh, Think and Grow Rich, like all this stuff, and learning sales and business through, continually getting scammed and then finding something else that's a little bit more legit. And then eventually I started a real business. I started my own Facebook game company back in 2009 when they opened up the platform. And at this point, so I can relate to all the degens that are listening to the idea of like making money, growing up poor and just trying to escape that, trying to figure out a way to get rich and do the shit you want to do. And then trying a whole bunch of different things, getting scammed quite a bit, losing your money, learning lessons, hopefully. And then by the time that I did start my business, it was like three of us bootstrapped it in the basement with basically no money. And we got 1 million players on our game in a month. So I just kind of
Wow.
like, after like my 50th thing that I tried, this worked. And so for the first time in my life, I really had some money coming in, and I was able to go make that movie. And I did that. I made the movie. I took 3 months off, and we went into the woods for 21 days and chopped up a bunch of teenagers. And it was called The Legend of the Psychotic Forest Ranger. It was about an angry demonic forest ranger that didn't like when you littered or left your campfire burning, so he'd kill you. But then I kind of was like, do I really want to be a filmmaker now? I mean, I got all this money coming in. Money's pretty cool. I should probably keep making the money. So I sort of put the film thing on the back burner and kept focusing on the business. And, before a couple of years in, say 2011, it was going okay. I mean, I had started a built a house and started a family and had some savings. And the business was obviously kind of was like a flash in the pan type of thing. 2 years in, it was like Zynga and all these big game companies.
Yeah.
EA was coming involved, so it was hard to continue making money if you weren't at the level where you could compete with these guys. So my thing was like, okay, I got to preserve this wealth because I'm not sure if I'm going to keep making it. And I was looking at, it was Occupy Wall Street was happening at the time. Ron Paul was making libertarianism popular, and like I said, Peter Schiff was out doing tons of content online and educating people about gold. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna take some of this money because the stock market looks like a total Ponzi scheme. The real estate market looks like it's going to explode, and all these banks are getting bailed out. They're going to keep printing money. The dollar's going to lose its value. It's not a smart idea to keep my money in the bank. So what I'm going to do is take my money and buy gold and silver. And that's kind of like, I had all this right time, right place, like learned all the lessons, got scammed a lot. So I had like early technology adopter, um, understood the value of scarce assets, and started sort of going down the rabbit hole of Austrian economics and libertarianism and sound money, big proponent of free speech, and started to actually try to buy gold. And so when I was like YouTubing, like how do you import gold into Canada, like small ingots and stuff like that without paying taxes, because I didn't want to pay taxes on on the bullion. This dude, his name is Da Vinci Jeremy. He's still around. He's like super hardcore into crypto and stuff. Lives in Dubai now though. But he was making videos on YouTube to show people how to import gold and silver into Canada because he's from Toronto. And he's like, at the end of one of his videos, he was like, and I got to tell you about this new thing called Bitcoin. If you like gold, you got to get Bitcoin. It's digital gold. You just mine it with your computer. And I was like, what? You could just make internet money, and they like you could actually make it decentralized. I'm in. So that's that's how I got to Bitcoin, was through like buying gold and silver. So in 2011, I took the rest of my savings and I put a third in gold, a third in silver, and a third in Bitcoin.
Nice.
And the gold is up like 60% or something. The silver's still down. I'm still down. I bought it at 50, so I'm still waiting to get in the black on that silver purchase. But the Bitcoin's up like 700,000% or something like that,
Yeah.
because it was $10 at the time when I started mining and buying.
Wow.
But that's my story. Obviously, I didn't make it. I kept making mistakes, as I did in the early days. I sold half my Bitcoin at $30 when it went up that summer, up 2x, 3x, or whatever. It's like, yeah, take your money and run, is what they say. But again, just not knowing how to be an investor, how to think about risk and conviction and all those things back then. One of the dumbest things I ever did was find Bitcoin early and then sell half of it when I made a 2x on it, or
Yeah.
3x.
Do you remember a computer game, an MMO called Ultima Online?
I do, yeah, yeah.
So
I
I
didn't
actually
play it. I played Earth and Beyond and other games like that, but Eve Online, stuff like that. But I know that a lot of people were playing Ultima and making some good money selling their characters and stuff.
I actually started playing the game in beta, and then I did a degree, and then I actually started a business in 2006, 2007, where I started actually selling stuff in Euro. So on eBay, I had an eBay store, and then I got into Eve, I got into World of Warcraft, EverQuest, and 2011, 2012, same time as you. Um, there were quite a lot of Asian suppliers, so it was mostly Chinese, but then there were also a couple of Japanese suppliers, obviously supplying stuff in these games. And the only way to pay these guys was through Bitcoin, and
Awesome.
that's how I got introduced to Bitcoin. So through obviously, and then obviously just leading on to your show, your podcast, Magic Internet Money. I mean, that's something that we've joked about, but that's what it is, right? I mean, it's kind of like this. The root of it is like, well, for me, it was like playing Eve Online was a big part of it. I'm a two times Alliance winner, Alliance tournament winner, by the way. That was a
Oh,
game that,
awesome.
no, dude, I was so into that game. It was ridiculous. I still have my characters. I still have my three main characters. They're sitting at
Oh,
like
sweet.
400 million skill points. I log in now and again. But yeah, that was a big part of that journey as well
Are
with
you
Bitcoin because,
researching anything right now, or
no,
is
not
all
really.
that
It's,
that game's all about like time, right? Like you got to actually like spend the time researching
you got to
skills
do
and
that.
stuff.
Yeah. So it's all time based skills. It's not about, like leveling up through action. It's through time. I mean, and so it's level 5 skill, level 5 for each skill. And I think there's now 1,100 or 1,200 skills per character. And you can either specialize in certain things or you can just do the whole lot. I mean, there's guys that have had characters there for close to 20 years. Just
Wow.
insane. And the game's still timeless. I mean, you log in, it's a beautiful game. It was built on Python, but that was a big part of kind of trading and in-game stuff, and it's what I enjoy about kind of like the crypto gaming side of things is this
Mhm.
ownership aspect of it. But just coming back to your podcast, I mean, I know that you've interviewed some of the best in the business, so to say, kind of like growing up in crypto, and you've had the opportunity to interview, in my opinion, some of the best, like Lynn, for one, Lynn Alden, one of those. Been dying to ask you this question: your top three that you've interviewed, and why?
Oh, um, well, I do my podcast kind of more as a learning experience for myself, because I'm still figuring it out. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't have all the answers, and I've been in this since 2011, but I mean, the money system is so confusing and complicated, and as I continue to stay curious and coachable in my worldviews or whatever, I want to challenge preconceived notions I had from learning about money from libertarians and um, Austrian economists and stuff like that, because there's this adversarial sort of view, this anti-authoritarian view that a lot of us have when we come in. It's like the system is unfair, it's a scam, and then we're kind of sometimes educated in propaganda, like
Yeah.
libertarian propaganda, even like about how the money system works. And if you talk to anybody who kind of knows a thing or two about the money system, you could just kind of sound like a lunatic if you say things like the money multiplier and the Federal Reserve is a privately owned corporation that you know they keep the profits of the national debt or whatever. Like there's all these weird things that like they seem at the surface to be true and completely unfair. And there's enough nonsense that goes on with the system that um, you don't need to go extreme with how the system is a scam. Like it literally is a Ponzi scheme, but not in the way that sometimes we're told it is. So, anyways, that's why I do the podcast, partially to kind of educate my friends that might listen to it, but mostly for me to kind of do a continual learning on the money system. And I think so because of that, three of my favorite folks that I've interviewed were um, John Seth. I'm not sure if you remember John Seth from Bitcoin Uncensored.
Yes.
If anybody doesn't know who John Seth is, like you kind of don't know what you're missing, you know. Like John Seth is one of the best characters in Bitcoin. He's very uh he's very like contrarian, and he's probably going to trigger you a lot, but he's super smart guy and knows a lot about the traditional money system, the banking system, whatever. And he's like an OG kind of podcaster or whatever. So, anyways, I interviewed him, and he's quite a good guy to have challenge you because he can take the other side of your beliefs. He will always do that. He like even if he doesn't believe it, he will just take the other side. He's one of those types of people where he'll challenge you completely to see how deep you know, like how deep your convictions are, or if you're just parroting nonsense
Yeah.
you've heard from people.
Yeah.
So that was a good episode. And I always like learning from him. It's like when I talk to Junseth, I feel like I'm one of those guys that are training at a Buddhist monk where they just like put you up against the seasoned guy just kicks you in the balls over and over and over again to just numb yourself. Talking to John Seth is like it's like ego training. It's like, oh, you think you're special, do you? Like bam, bam, take one of these, take one of these. And you just have to just kind of you either sit there and take it and become numb and just numb your ego and kill your ego, or you get defensive and then you start digging into your opinions and stuff. So sparring with John Seth is kind of like fruitless, you know. It's like he doesn't hold his convictions like that. He's there to kind of like entertain and also yeah, he's just entertaining himself basically. But he's really smart. So John Seth's a great guy, and he just did an episode on the what Bitcoin did. People should definitely listen to the what Bitcoin did episode with John Seth about Bitcoin scams and crypto scams. Number two would be Dr. Edwin Vieira, which was it's a unique interview in that he doesn't do many interviews, and he's the author of the book Pieces of Eight, and Pieces of Eight is a book that Trace Mayer read when he was in business school, I think. And I was a big fan of Trace Mayer, and when Trace would occasionally talk about Dr. Edwin Vieira, Pieces of Eight, and it's this 800-page full telling and tome of historical um, constitutional money law about how gold and silver were money before the United States was founded, during the colonial days, before then, during the Constitution creation. It's just like it's like an expert dissection of gold and silver in terms of constitutional law. And he's a monetary historian, and he doesn't know how to use computers. So like getting that getting that interview
Oh.
set up was so complicated. I ended up doing two interviews with him. The first one was just useless because the whole time he was just like, how do I use this damn thing? Claire, get over here. The internet doesn't work. And I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, like I can talk to you. We're good. We're good. He's like,
Yeah.
just hold on a second. My wife She must have some game installed on this computer. Claire, get over it. He's just like constantly all over the screen, and he's just like yelling at his wife. I was like, "Whoa, let's go. Why don't we redo this like next week or something? We'll spend an hour to make sure it's set up properly." And then he's like, "Okay, let's do it." So it was a fun interview, but super knowledgeable guy, and
Yeah.
he's just like he doesn't do many interviews, so it's like one for posterity, I guess. And then the third one would be probably Joseph Wang, the author of Central Banking 101, because I was one of the first podcasts. I think I might have been the first podcast he went on talking about Bitcoin and Bitcoin topics. And because he worked at the Federal Reserve, he's got a wealth of knowledge in terms of like how the Fed actually works and like how the discount window works and the actual mechanics of like commercial bank settlement and the all these things that we were always talking about, like how the traders on the Federal Reserve actually operate, like the FOMC committee, like when they give their guidance and their targets, like what the Fed traders actually do and how that's changed over time. And yeah, just he knows a lot about the Fed system. So I was kind of like we were on this debate in Clubhouse talking about like does quantitative easing actually cause inflation? Like this was a big hot topic in the last couple of years of like there's the one camp that doesn't think that quantitative easing actually causes inflation, the other camp does, and it's quite a nuanced topic, but there was some mechanical sort of workings of the Fed and the commercial banks and the Eurodollar system and stuff that I wanted to kind of ask him detailed questions on, and he completely was awesome and came on twice actually. So sorry for the long answer, but those are my three favorite, I
No,
would
that's
say, guests.
awesome. I'm going to go and watch them now. And those are obviously important topics. So, does quantitative easing cause inflation? What's the general consensus around that?
Well, I believe it does because the the quantitative easing, the argument for quantitative easing not causing inflation is that the bank reserves that are given to the banks are not money.
Yeah,
There's like Jeff Snyder and Steve Van Meter and all these types of macro guys, and they will say that like bank reserves are not money because they're trapped inside of the Federal Reserve database basically, and they don't make it outside of that into the economy to cause price inflation. But I don't look at the Federal Reserve and the commercial banks and the Congress as separate entities. I look at them as all, the same sort of system of control of money, that, there's three wings of the same vulture, if you will.
yeah,
The Congress gives the power of the, the power to the Federal Reserve to regulate the commercial banks. So the argument boils down to it's like a lot of the Fed defenders will say no, the Congress through the CARES Act and through deficit spending, that is how money gets inflated in the real economy, and how the money that they create through deficit spending does cause inflation because it goes outside of the Federal Reserve system, which is
yeah.
typically not, it's just M0. It's not actually um,
M1. Yeah,
making it to like pay people's bank accounts. It's bank accounts for banks,
yeah,
But then so if you say that no, you got to blame the Congress, you got to blame the government because they're the ones that create inflation through deficit spending, then you're kind of like leaving the Fed off the hook. You're kind of giving them the um the free pass to say like, well, they don't do anything through QE. All they're trying to do is like stabilize the banking system and prevent a liquidity crisis from happening, which would cause economic turmoil for everybody and job losses, etc. But the other side of it is that the commercial, like 95% of all money that's ever been created is created at the commercial bank layer through credit. So any time, like the idea of a fractional reserve system is kind of silly, actually. Like the money multiplier, where we all kind of believe this sort of fairy tale about you deposit $10,000 into your bank account, the bank has to keep 10% of that in reserves, and they can just lend out $99,000 to someone else.
yeah.
and then that someone else takes the 9,000 and they put that in their
Just the
bank
same.
account, and then
Mm.
they only keep 900 of it, and then that bank can lend out 8,100, and that multiplies until 10,000 becomes 100,000.
Mm.
That sort of concept is not real. That's not how it works. It's much
Yeah.
worse than that. It's not actually a fractional reserve bank system, it's a fictional reserve bank system, because the reserves are set to zero. Like
Yeah.
in Canada and the UK, like there's been zero reserve requirements for decades now, and since 2020, the reserves were set to zero in the United States. So banks they're not constrained by the reserves. That's not how it works. They're only constrained to create money by demand for money. So like if you it's credit worthiness, they deem you your credit worthiness, and then the demand for money. So as long as you want to borrow money, they're able to print it. Like they literally have the license to print the money if you want the money and if they deem you
Mm.
credit worthy. So there is no reserve requirements. They have like liquidity coverage ratios that they have to like there's other sort of like regulations, or they can't just like have no assets. So there is some assets kind of backing um, the ability for them to fulfill withdrawal requirements. Like they basically have to have 30 days of expected net outflows in reserves. So if they expect that customers have a certain sticky rate with their savings accounts and whatever, they have to keep that amount in reserves so that there will be no instability in the banking system. But they're not constrained by reserves. They're only constrained by the demand for people to borrow money.
Yeah.
So really inflation is caused by people borrowing too much money, the government printing too much money to fund deficit spending, and I believe the Federal Reserve enabling the Eurodollar money system and enabling the banks to be able to continue to print money, and kind of like they're the policemen of the banking system, right? So like they have some responsibility here. And when you look at you look at like who is involved in the decisions and in positions of power in the banking system and in the government and in the commercial and in the Federal Reserve central banking system, it's a revolving door. So it's not that, oh, these are like totally unrelated parties. I mean, you have people who are the chair of the biggest banks that, then become like securities brokers who then become head of the Fed. So it's like it's a continual revolving door between all three wings, branches of the money system. So to say that that the Fed does not cause inflation through QE, I think is a huge mistake. It's all the same. Like it's all of those things cause inflation and cause the debasement of your savings.
Agreed. It's kind of like well, it's not kind of, it is most definitely, the ability for banks to increase your credit card facility per se. I mean, here in South Africa, they phone you and they say, well, we'd like to increase your spending limit and we'd like to just justify that expenditure. And I'm like, well, I'm not interested. It's fine. And then a month later, my expenditure's been raised, which means they're actually giving me the opportunity to spend more than I should without actually doing those checks and balances because they can see that I pay it off. And I think it's just a micro scale of obviously what you're talking about on a much greater scale. And I think that's obviously the fundamental problem. And if they are getting bailouts and they are getting handouts, then they can continue doing that. And you have, like you say, the revolving door. And it ain't going to stop anytime soon unless they cease to do business, which we obviously saw last year. That was an interesting kind of play on things when I think how many banks in the US actually shut and
I
closed
think
their
it was
doors?
only like 3 or 4 banks in the end,
Yeah.
but they were the
And they were,
biggest, like 3 or 4 of the biggest banks in U.S. history.
yes. I mean, it's interesting from obviously at the core of it is like the question that needs to be asked is it's not whether Bitcoin fixes this. It's more around how does Bitcoin fix this? And that's obviously a big question. It's a monster question, and we could probably discuss it for like 2 or 3 shows. But I mean, in essence, where do you see or what do you see the role of Bitcoin around kind of like at its true in its true essence around monetary value?
Well, Bitcoin fixes fixes it for the individual. I don't think it fixes it for the state. Um, because I'm not one of those folks that kind of believe in the idea of hyper Bitcoinization. I just don't think that's a realistic scenario that we're going to see governments give up the power of money creation and redistribution of wealth and adopt the Bitcoin standard. And
Yeah,
I don't think that it's either realistic either to assume that just Bitcoin's this like black hole that's going to suck all value from every single thing in the planet, including all fiat money. But I mean, I do think that like that's a really cool metaphor, and you can think of Bitcoin as a black hole that does suck excess store of value premium from real estate, stocks, bonds, fiat currencies, collectibles, all these things. Bitcoin is like the gravity of Bitcoin's monetary properties, once you understand it, is kind of inescapable. Once you understand what Bitcoin really is, it's hard for you to not want to continue to use that thing as a generational wealth vehicle to store value into the future for 100 years or more. So as Bitcoin becomes more and more understood and the adoption of Bitcoin grows, you're obviously going to have like 90% of the people that use the internet have no idea what the internet is and don't use it properly. Same thing with Bitcoin. It's going to be, in 10 years or whatever, when say like we've we've crossed the chasm and we're into say, mainstream adoption phase and everybody has some Bitcoin, just like everybody has a Facebook account or a WhatsApp or Messenger or whatever. It's just like, part of life is social media. Part of life will be Bitcoin. But 90% of people will not be holding their own keys, caring about their financial privacy. They'll likely just be holding it in like a retirement fund and a wrapper somehow or something like that. But I think for all the like to directly answer, like, how does Bitcoin fix this? Well, if you identify the problem of debasement of your savings, then you have to then kind of figure out, well, what's the solution? What's the best way to stop the debasement of your purchasing power? And that is to move into a vehicle that can hold your purchasing power. And Bitcoin is like, you know, probably at this point, at least until I'd say $1 million per coin, it's probably the best way to grow your purchasing power, not just hold your purchasing power. So there's, there's like, I don't know, 4% max of people in the world that have Bitcoin, I think. I think it's more like 1%, but I think I saw Willy Woo tweet something recently where it's about 4%. And if you're one of those people that have been using Bitcoin to store your value so far, you've done really well.
yeah,
And I think that's going to continue on and on. I'm less. I used to be more worried about things about like Ethereum beating Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash, you know, with the fork
yeah,
wars and all the miners that were going over, or the government stopping Bitcoin, or any of these things. I used to be more worried about it, but as I continue to hold and I continue to learn more, I I kind of get more and more confident and more conviction on just, the right thing to do is just buy and hold Bitcoin for like the next 20 years and
yeah,
just keep accumulating more Bitcoin. And Bitcoin for humanity, Bitcoin will be affixing this moment because it will, I believe, add a negative pressure to governments on their ability to do unchecked spending as we move back to a world where um, there's competition for resources and there's currency wars and things like this even more heating up. Governments will be they're less and less able to hide the type of theft that they're doing to fund war and to fund their kind of expansionary bureaucracies that are kind of driving up inflation and cost of living. We're getting to the end game of the fiat money system the way it exists currently. Typically, I think it's about every 50 years or so, there's a huge shift in the way the fiat money system works. The last time was the 1971, Nixon took us off the gold standard. Before that, it was uh, when and I guess the US dollar was kind of created for the first time.
1930s.
Um, yeah, with the Federal Reserve System and pegging, banning gold ownership and pegging the gold up to $15 an ounce. These are all kind of like redistributions of wealth, these things that happen. So like in the 20s and 30s when FDR did the New Deal and banned gold ownership, the thing I learned from Dr. Edwin Vieira, which was really interesting because these are all historically kind of relevant things. Like there's a lot of stuff happening today that has happened in the past, just with different currencies or
Yeah,
whatever. But when in the 1920s, right before the Great Depression, bonds were actually, there was a gold clause contract in bonds. So if you had government bonds, if you're a wealthy person and you had bought a government bond, you're earning an interest from the government on the bond. You could actually choose to get paid back in gold. So back in those days when we were on the gold standard, it wasn't just the money was linked to gold. It was you could get paid in gold for your bonds for contracts.
yeah,
So when FDR wanted to spend his way out of the depression, he had to do Executive Order 6102 to prevent Americans that owned the debt from redeeming the debt in gold. He had, because they were on a gold limit, with the gold standard, in order to print money, it would have meant that he would be opening himself up to the liability of people asking to receive the payments in gold because now the gold is worth more in dollars.
yeah,
So he printed the money, but also banned people from owning gold, and then closed the gold clause contract. He
yeah,
eliminated that. So then the future bonds that were issued, they were no longer redeemable in dollars or gold. And then he instantly devalued the dollars. So that was looked at as a devaluation, but it was a transfer of wealth from the rich to the poor. That's the way it was kind of looked at. All the wealthy bond owners, they held the debt, like, so the government was a creditor to these wealthy people. And it was looked at as a transfer of wealth from the rich to the poor, and people got behind it. And that happened again in the 1970s when Nixon ended the gold redeemability window, and it was kind of looked at as a default, same as in the 1920s. Like that was a default on the obligations of the U.S. government because you could no longer redeem in gold. Same thing happened in 1971. They took the U.S. off the gold standard completely now, and then they ended the ability for foreign countries to redeem their reserves, like their dollar currency in gold. And that was another default. It was looked at as a default, and it kind of started a new era of the U.S. dollar. So that's two shifts of the U.S. dollar already, and the one that we're in right now is kind of happening. Um, it's kind of happening. I don't know how it's going to resolve, but there's no gold. There's no way to take it off the gold standard. Like they can't do that move again this time.
yeah,
So there's something else is going to have to happen, and it's very like it's basically kind of what I think is going to happen is just what everybody else I believe thinks is going to happen is just continued inflation. They're just going to
yeah,
keep printing, and there's going to be a lot of people are going to be wrecked from high interest rates and high cost of living because back in the 1920s, wealth inequality was actually fixed. It was actually made better in the 30s and 40s. So when
mm,
they did that, when they did the New Deal, wealth inequality was like horrible, and then it actually kind of closed the gap when they did this New Deal and they did all these social programs, and they did the redistribution of wealth to the rich to the poor. But they've done, and then in 1971 it kind of happened again. Like wealth inequality started getting worse, and then they did this redistribution of wealth, but then it went the opposite way.
yeah,
And since 1971, wealth inequality has just continually gotten worse and worse and worse. And as the central banks keep interfering, wealth inequality is at like an all-time high. And what are they going to do? Like, how can they do a redistribution of wealth now? Well, they can't, because wealth inequality is the worst it's ever been. They have really no moves other than this like MMT stuff that they're talking about, which is just give everybody money.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the only way to sort of reduce wealth inequality is just give everybody money. And that's going to cause massive inflation because there's a bunch of financially illiterate people that are kind of like trying to take over the show, combined with the malincentives of the revolving door of bankers and, all these think boys that, work for the Federal Reserve and for the big banks that want to continue keeping their ability to control the money and profit off of basically printing money and providing financial services. So they don't want to see that end. So we're
Yeah.
at this like, how does Bitcoin fix it? Well, it allows you to opt out of the system because there's like this vice that we're all in right now. Wealth inequality is horrible. It's really bad. And if they push the lever of interest rates up, that's going to crush the people at the bottom that hold any debt. And all these like Keynesians and MMT people keep saying stupid things like they say that when the debt gets, they say poor people benefit basically from what they're
Yeah.
doing,
Mm.
but poor people don't own assets like mortgages. So when they say that, the interest rates are going to help poor people because it's going to make their mortgages, sorry, the inflation rate is going to make their mortgages you're going to pay back with cheaper dollars. It's like people who own the mortgages,
Mm.
if you're paying it back in the future with cheaper dollars, the dollars are worth less because your wage hopefully goes up. Well, then you actually got like a wealth transfer.
Yeah.
So like these fiat people are trying to say, oh, this is good for poor people when inflation happens, when the money supply increases, because your dollars get worth less, and that means you can pay your debt gets paid back with cheaper dollars. But it's like 50% of people don't have mortgages, and they're not getting any benefit from inflation. The only thing that they're doing is getting crushed more because they're at the cusp of the cost of living. Like they are paycheck to paycheck. So people like that, I mean, really anybody should use Bitcoin. They should study Bitcoin. They should understand that inflation's not likely going down.
Yeah.
Interest rates are likely going up. Your wages are likely not going to go up. So what do you do? Like, you either wait for them to give you UBI or you suffer or you pull yourself out of it. And like a lot of people in Germany in the 1940s or whatever, when Weimar Germany was right before hyperinflation in Weimar Germany, this book When Money Dies was a really great telling of that story. They started doing basically, what were they doing? Well, they were trading meme coins basically. Like 15% of the population were basically trading meme coins on Solana in Weimar Germany. So it was like, do you want to go to work, or do you want to like go buy some toilet paper and sit on it for 2 months and then make the
Yeah.
same amount of money that you would have made at your work? So we can see all the signs right now of pre collapse of the money system just by people's behavior, just by the financial markets, the way the financial markets are behaving, and all these volatile swings up and down, all these crazy nonsensical coins that are going, and not just coins, but stocks and everything too, going crazy. That's just a sign that the money is broken. And this is what happened when money dies. So what should you do? Like whatever you can to make money, but like not just money. You got to figure out what's the best form of money that's going to hold your purchasing power and potentially grow your purchasing power passively over time just because of its properties. And that's
Yeah.
Bitcoin.
So we accumulate Bitcoin, right? But how do we then leverage Bitcoin as a tool to be able to do what we need to do without actually spending our Bitcoin? What does that scenario look like?
Well, most people don't have enough Bitcoin and don't need to spend their Bitcoin. They just need to keep acquiring more Bitcoin.
Yes.
Unless you're like all in Bitcoin, then that's not a problem you have to worry about, really. You know what I mean?
So
Like what? as long as you
Yeah.
have the ability to make money, like to make fiat money or whatever,
Yes.
you're a degen trader, whatever it is, and you're good at it, which is rare. But if you have a way to generate income, you got to think about Bitcoin as a completely separate thing than crypto. And you think about it like your retirement fund, basically. Because there is a real possibility that the retirement fund and the social security funds are going to be bankrupt. And it's not likely that they're going to go to zero. What's more likely is that the government's going to bail it out, which is going to cause more debasement of the money supply and more
Yeah.
inflation. And at some point, the debt system's going to everybody's going to kind of realize, oh, this is one big Ponzi scheme. This stuff is toilet paper. It's worthless. I don't know when that happens. Maybe that's 10 years. Maybe that's 20 years. Maybe it's 50 years. Who knows? They could find ways to kick the can down the road. But just 100% guaranteed, what's going to happen is the dollars are going to get worse and worse in terms of holding purchasing power. They're going to keep declining in value. So you got to think about Bitcoin as like on one end of the spectrum, it's a bucket that you only put into. You got to put it in multi-sig. Like figure out a Bitcoin only wallet. Don't be using crypto wallets to hold your Bitcoin. Like you don't want your FOMO sapien side to be able to see access to your Bitcoin. You don't want him holding your Bitcoin keys. Like you really gotta. I really think people should have. Like everybody should have an inner maxi. You gotta like
Agreed. I completely
part
agree
of
with you on this.
part
Absolutely.
of at least for an hour a day, you should like disconnect from your Telegram rooms and your Discord rooms and just watch Michael Saylor videos
So
and
I
like just
wanted,
let your
but Michael
develop your
speaks,
Bitcoin Maxi.
Michael speaks about borrowing off the back of Bitcoin, and I wanted to just explore that with you. What are your thoughts around that? Because he's a big advocate for that, and that's what he's doing, right? I mean, at the
Well,
moment, that's what he's doing. He's effectively doing the classic DeFi looping without kind of like this like strict line drawn in the sand around being liquidated. But that's what he's doing. I mean, that's realistically what he's doing. He's looping and he's borrowing off the back of his Bitcoin.
well, he's not really. No, he's borrowing off his shares. Like he's borrowing. He's kind of doing a speculative attack on his own shares through the public market system. When he
Okay.
talks about borrowing on your Bitcoin, what he's talking about is in the future when there's more mature lending markets for Bitcoin, and let's say like the interest rate is more reasonable, like around whatever the prime rate is. Let's say the
Yes.
rate's 5% or something like that. He gives the like example of like the Rockefellers or these dynastic wealth families where because there's like a friend of mine, Garrett Gunderson, wrote this really good book, What Would the Rockefellers Do? And he talks about the difference between the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts and other dynastic families that
Yeah.
lost their wealth. And the thing that the successful families that have dynasties that live through generations do is that they don't sell their assets, and then they use the system to kind of like the life insurance, to like refill the trusts all the time. So if you're going to be eventually taking from the trust, you have to have a life insurance policy that pays to the trust as the beneficiary. So it's like a refilling trust, and they don't sell their assets. They develop their mindset, they develop their skills as leaders and business people so they can continue generating income, and they keep their assets and they borrow against their assets when needed, including their life insurance. So not just their property, but their life insurance and their portfolios. And then you do it at a reasonable rate. So right now, I don't think it's very smart to do it. And I don't think Michael Saylor would suggest to people to do it right now because it's like 12% or more to borrow against your Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That's that's hard to maintain that. And then there's always the risk of getting liquidated unless you have like a really good LTV, like, you got 10 times more Bitcoin
Yeah.
in there than, because
Yeah.
think about this. This happened to me already. And you got to think about how crazy this is. So let's say you want to take a loan against your Bitcoin, right? You put, say, what's Bitcoin at now? Let's
Seven
just use
sixty
round
nine.
numbers. Let's pretend it's at
69.
100. So it's at
100.
100,000, right?
Yeah.
You put 10 Bitcoin in there worth a million.
Million. Yeah.
If you're going to borrow on a 50% LTV, you can take $500,000.
500K. Yeah.
So you got $500,000. You go buy a house, whatever it is you're doing. I guess if you live in Canada, you buy like a fishing shack for 500,000 or whatever you're gonna whatever you're gonna purchase. And then you're paying 12% a year on that, so that's $60,000 or something like that in
Yeah,
interest. That's a lot of interest. But
there's
let's forget about the interest. Let's just look at the situation that happens when Bitcoin drops. So Bitcoin drops 50%. Now that 10 Bitcoin is only worth $500,000. You have to top up to get yourself back to 50% LTV. You got to put another 10 Bitcoin in there. Now you've
yeah,
got 20 Bitcoin in there worth $1 million, and you still have a $500,000 loan. Bitcoin drops again 50%. You have to top it back up again. Now you have 40 Bitcoin in there. That's only two 50% drops.
yeah,
So people are taking crazy Bitcoin loans, not realizing, wait, it doubles every time it drops 50%. You have to keep the LTV up. So it's so easy to get liquidated on these loans because it's volatile. So they require you to have like a really conservative, healthy LTV. So they're protected. So you got 250% loan drops, and you have to like quadruple the amount of Bitcoin that goes in there. So I don't think it's very smart to be using Bitcoin loans unless you're putting like 10 times the amount of Bitcoin
yeah,
originally in there, so that you're prepared for 250% drops and still have some cushion. Otherwise, you're pretty much going to get liquidated on these
yeah,
loans. And it's not a good feeling to get liquidated on one of these loans because you didn't think it through and you took too much risk on the loan. So until we get mature lending markets, which probably
will
will happen, I
happen.
mean, I know it will
Definitely.
happen. It's
Yeah,
just
definitely.
going to take a while. But like
Hmm.
his idea is like, let's say in 10 years, Bitcoin's $1 million. You can take a loan on your Bitcoin like you can on your mortgage or your house, and you're paying like prime interest rates, competitive rates for sure. I mean, all day long, I'd be doing that.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to I want to get into your thoughts around kind of like the crypto side of things as opposed to Bitcoin, because we're very clearly in agreement that Bitcoin's very much a separate thing to what crypto is, even though there is kind of like a lot of carry and there's a lot of like the similar kind of rails and entries and exits. But I'm primarily interested in your opinion around, first of all, Ethereum, and then also what crypto has to offer as a whole in terms of like where it is right now and where you think it's going, and where its place is in relation to not only the real world in inverted commas but also with Bitcoin. Another big question, but I think you obviously know the landscape, you understand it, and I'm really curious as to like what your thoughts are around that.
Well, my thoughts, it's kind of like it's kind of on it's inevitable, I think, that at this point Wall Street is going to try to make as much money as possible from getting involved in crypto. And a really good book that I read really kind of like shocked me and made me kind of unfortunately kind of realize how insidious Wall Street is,
Yeah.
and that they're going to do the same thing with crypto. It's called Fiasco by Frank Portnoy. And another book. I mean, I'm going to send everybody away. All these degens are going to have a big giant book list to read, but maybe just ask ChatGPT about it or something. I don't know. But these are all great books. These books I'm recommending are all really good books. Helped me shape my mindset, my frame of thinking. Fiasco is a really amazing book, and it tells the story of the Wall Street derivatives creation, not the 2008 bubble that we're all familiar with the CDOs and the mortgage, derivatives. This is the creation of the derivatives industry, like in the 1990s, when it didn't exist to when it existed. And in the 90s, it's very parallel to crypto, to like DeFi and all this stuff. Um, if you basically, I'll try to summarize and say the comparisons and why I think it's similar and where it's going. Tell me if you think this is familiar. So these companies started to realize that they could use new technology to make a lot of money, and they would they would start to sell this ability to generate yield from this new technology to pensions, to high net worth individuals, to sovereign wealth funds, to companies and banks. And they use this new technology to package up things that were very confusing, complex math products mixed with easier to understand traditional products like a bond. And they would go and sell these things to these pools of capital, and they'd make tons of money doing it. They would just make them from nothing. They just print these things up. They'd make them, and then they'd sell them, and they'd make tons of money. And it was very popular. It became extremely profitable to create a company that did this. So everybody did it. I mean, anybody who was an opportunistic, person did it. A lot of people joined to become salespeople and brokers of these new technology products. And then the regulators started to get interested in it because it started to become kind of take over the system, started to become huge. And as it became more and more of a threat to the existing traditional products, the regulators stepped in and started to apply pressure to the companies and the brokers that were involved in this new technology to be more transparent about it and to follow the same rules and regulations that the rest of the financial industry was following. And by this time, though, it was a little bit too late because the public pension system in California and like big banks and a lot of stuff had already been involved in this. They kind of bought the Kool-Aid and they put tons of money in this new product, and it blew up. And there was a bunch of fraud and there was a bunch of scams. It turns out a whole bunch of this stuff was toxic and there was nothing really backing it. It was just a bunch of fluff. And there was, offshore companies that were hiding things. And then the whole thing blew up. And actually, the public pension or the California, I forget which city it was, but one of the cities in California, one of those big cities like Oakland or something like that, their municipality went bankrupt because they were exposed to these derivatives. And then, so this is the 90s. So then the whole thing blew up, but everybody that made money kind of walked away. There wasn't a couple people went to jail, but it wasn't anything big. And then the industry, like the regulators, the SEC, the CFTC, all the regulators started to say, we're going to clamp down on this. Derivatives are toxic. These things are not safe for Americans to hold. We're going to clamp down on this and regulate this thing, tame this Wild West so that it is not a threat to the financial system. And the Wall Street banks and the companies that were involved in the derivatives, they all started for 2 years lobbying the government and putting up these ad campaigns against the chair of the SEC and started trying to say that this is going to drive innovation away from America. We can't let the offshore companies get the foothold of this new technology. This is going to create jobs in America. This is good for America. And wouldn't you know it, they succeeded. The tens and millions or hundreds of millions of dollars of lobbying money that went towards saving the derivatives industry in America succeeded. And the SEC was neutered. They weren't able to regulate the derivatives industry like they wanted to, the CFTC, et cetera. And then so they had to follow the same regulations as the banks did, but they weren't shut down. It was game was on again. And then for the next 10 years, they were basically able to go off and then create the biggest financial bubble in financial history that ended in the collapse of the financial economy with the derivatives bubble of 2008 falling apart and taking down the banking system. So that story is worth reading because if you just parallel the derivatives, that's exactly what happened with the derivatives in the 1990s. And that's exactly what just happened with crypto in the last few years, DeFi and all this stuff. And while it was happening, I kept going back to the book. I'm like, yep, this happened. Yeah, okay, yeah, this happened. Like this is crazy. It's just history repeating. And we're at this point now where my biggest concern and my biggest criticism or whatever about crypto and Ethereum, DeFi, all that stuff was like, the regulators are just going to crush it. And it's so risky to be involved in this thing because, for one, like, I'm the type of person that's like, what is this shit, really? Like, it's just nonsense. It's just toxic, synthetic nonsense. There's no real value. I'm like a real skeptic of 99.9% of everything going on in that world. The same way I am in the Wall Street world with derivatives. I mean, what value for society and for anybody is there really in you being a master trader of the VIX? Like, it's like, oh yeah, I made so much money shorting the VIX. Like, okay, how does that add value to society? Like, how is that real? Like, VIX is just volatility, is a concept, and you can actually like make money hedging volatility. Like, what is this is really like there's a lot of money and mental resources that have gone towards just complete casino games in Wall Street. And I mean, it's pretty much now Wall Street is just a casino. It's basically a casino. It started off, futures, derivatives, things like that. It started off like it made sense. If you're producing wheat and you want to hedge the risk of a flood or a drought, then you can sell your future supply at a current price to lock in that value. And then a trader on the other side will provide a service in the market by, finding, the arbitrage opportunity to be smarter than the farmer at predicting the weather, and then know, oh, I can buy this now. I'm taking a risk that the drought's not going to happen like he thinks, or I can, whatever. And then you can short and you can long, because if you can't short, I originally I was like, oh, shorting is a scam. Like, how can you short something you don't own? But then, like, Max Kaiser actually was like, yeah, but if you can't short something, then all you can do is long something, and then that just provides a inefficient price,
Well, it's an imbalance.
mechanism.
That would be an
Yes, an
imbalance. Yeah.
imbalance. The price
Mm.
discovery can only go up usually. There's not
Yeah.
an equal force to go down because people can't
Yeah.
take their conviction to sell it aggressively. So it's like, okay, but then naked shorting, that's illegal and that doesn't make any sense. But like, naked shorting happens, all these weird derivatives and then synthetic derivatives, which are bets on just nonsense, like the interest rate fluctuation of another country. Then you can bet on that and package that up with a bond and sell it as a new product. And it's crazy. So DeFi to me is Wall Street 2.0. It's like rebuilding all of the things that's wrong with Wall Street on blockchains and like saying it's the future. And it's very, to me, it's just like, I look at that, I'm like, it's nonsense, and it's trying to be sold as like a revolution and for the people, like the whole Web3 concept. It's like, oh, this is like our new technology. It's fair, it's permissionless, and it's like, really, it's just the same as Web 2.0. It's the same exact people as Web 2.0, except you add the Wall Street financialization layer on top of it, and then you pre-mine it, and then you dump it on people. And then it's like, it's already been pre-mined. Like, Web3 has already been pre-mined, and now it's just being dumped on people. So I think that there's like a massive resistance from the public to financialization in general of everything they do, and to derivatives and to synthetic finance products. So, like, I don't think it matters what I think, though, because people are going to do what they're going to do. Penny stocks exist, network marketing exists, derivatives exist. Um, Markets are, this is free markets. So it was really hard for me to deal with reconciling my belief in free markets with what happened in 2021, 2022 in crypto, because I did feel like, well, this is insane. How can we allow for so much fraud and scams? Because it's
Yeah.
it's distracting people from finding Bitcoin. It's causing tons of financial losses. It's muddying the waters of where the value really is here. But then at the same time, like, that is free markets. I mean, if you're free to go lose your money gambling in a casino, I guess you should also be free to lose your money, restaking in Anchor, um, with your Celsius ETH or whatever you're doing. Like, that's a free market too. So I just kind of resolved to like see what happens, and not I'm trying not anymore this whole cycle. I was kind of like building myself up, unfortunately, or just subconsciously or whatever, as like the Peter Schiff of DeFi. And people kept calling me that, and I was like, maybe I shouldn't like go down that road, because as I found myself like agreeing with tweets from Peter Schiff, I was like, maybe I'm too far down the down the line here on being critical on this stuff. So, anyways, I'm super critical on it all. I don't think there's really much value there at all, because I'm more for like, I'm like a financial activist. And I think Bitcoin is the fairest, most decentralized, most censorship resistant thing, that most people in the world would be better to just hold that. And people don't want to become stock traders. People don't want to become analysts. Like, they just want to like work their job, maybe start their business, have fun with their family, play their pickleball, whatever they're doing. And a small percentage of the people want to become like stock analysts and full-time stock traders. And even those people, the statistics show that, what is it, 95% of those folks who do it are not going to make any money, because they don't have the skills to learn risk management, trade setups, follow emotionlessly, execute their trades based on trading rules, figure out the difference between, you know, um, being an investor and being a trader, like not shifting your mindset. A lot of people, once their position hits their stop loss, they sort of like lower their stop loss instead of actually taking the loss, because they're not professional traders, they're bag holders trying to convince themselves that they're traders. And that's how, you drink the Kool-Aid on, oh, this technology is revolutionary, DeFi, it's future. Like, that's Kool-Aid. So I have no problem with people being traders. But with all that aside, it doesn't matter what I think. Really, what I notice is that crypto is paralleling derivatives, and now that Wall Street is, you know, trying to put up ETFs for Ethereum and all these other products, which I imagine they're going to probably try to do, then it's just a way for them to make fees. It's a way for them to make money, and it's so complex. It's like a perfect replication of the derivatives bubble they did in the 90s, because it's so new that I'm like kind of seeing us in a branch of the universe where it wouldn't surprise me if in 5 years there was like Wall Street boiler rooms calling up your grandmother, selling her like, you know, dog vibrator coin derivative Ponzi bubble DeFi bond, which is just basically like 25% Bitcoin, 50% US Treasuries, and 25% like some nonsense meme coin bullshit
Yes.
paying 1,000% APY, and they just call it like a crypto bond. Like, hey, grandma, you want to be in the crypto? Buy a crypto bond. It's going to yield you 50% a year. It's amazing. Trump loves it. I
Yeah.
could. Wall Street's going to be selling this shit. So, like, that's what I'm preparing for. I'm preparing for the world where basically complete takeover by Wall Street of DeFi and crypto coins and stuff.
So there's a big part of me that definitely agrees with you around the casino aspect of it, and anyone out there who's listening to the podcast who's kind of like denies it is kind of, I think, delusional. It's like that is very much a big part of it. But I think where I kind of urge you to maybe think a little bit differently around this. Not that I have any place to do that, but just hear me out. Is this whole idea around, it's almost like there's different levels to the way that I understand money and how it works. And you've eloquently described it. It's kind of like, people want to trade, or they pretend that they're trading, or people want to like increase their holdings through some kind of, whether it's a scam or whether it's not, there's like this thing that we kind of like, so in life you get told that you need to have like a retirement annuity where you put X amount of money every month in an account, and you kind of like get the benefit when you retire. And it's essentially like a pension fund, but it's kind of like something that you bolt onto a pension fund. And my question and my thinking goes around a system that actually allows you to do all of that stuff with the security that the Bitcoin network does. Is there a world that we have those kind of products that actually aren't about gambling, that aren't actually about a scenario that is net negative? overall, but is actually net positive, but uses this technology that allows for transparency. Obviously, the permissionless, the trustless aspects. We talk about, like, how do you hold your Bitcoin? Do you store it, you know, in a cold wallet, or do you store it on a central exchange? Like that education. And, you talk about being a financial activist. Surely, from that perspective, those possibilities exist. I mean, we already know from custody that's a no brainer. But then, surely, from managing your own finances and then truly utilizing Bitcoin as this tool that I mean, we obviously both agree on that. How do we take it further? Does it just stay as something that's in a wallet and it's kind of like protects me, or can we actually extend it beyond that using these tools that are currently being built?
Um, I just don't see the DeFi stuff as comparable to what I think you're talking about. I feel like all that stuff is, like I said, it's just rebuilding the same nonsense that Silicon Valley and Wall Street did to kind of like pilfer value from the public, but doing it on blockchains. And there's no real value there. Most of it's just money printing, like forms of money printing, it's just like creating
Yeah.
pre-mining and like creating coins from nothing that you earn them by staking the coins and then getting more of the coins, and that's yield. And like, but what is it really? Like the only part of DeFi where I feel like actually has some fundamental value is the stuff that, whether it needs to or not, it has like fees. So like if you're generating fees off of exchange and then you're sharing the fees back with the token holder, then that kind of is more like a traditional investment equity. It's like a Curve or something like that, I think, does it. There's a whole bunch of them, right? Where they add a fee into the swap or into the
Yeah.
stake or into
Into
the
the
into
into
the
the liquidity pools. Yeah.
and then a certain percentage of the fees go back to the token holder. But then you got to look at those things as more like PE ratios to analyze the value of them. And instead of looking at PE ratios, a lot of people use bubble logic and like Kool-Aid serving size instead of PE, like protocol earning ratio is really what you should be looking at. If this thing generates $1 million in fees a year, it shouldn't be valued at $100 million.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
would you go to the local uh, credit union and look at their profit statement? It's like, oh, they earn $1 million a year. I'm going to buy your shares for 100x the value. Like that's the world we live in now, thanks to fiat money and like bubble. When money dies, it's store of value. The store of value premium has leaked into everything.
Mm.
Real estate, stocks are 80 to 100 trillion, probably $200 trillion of value in real estate and stocks. And the utility value, the actual value that you get from your home is probably, like, at least in Canada, it's like probably 33%.
Mm.
So I think there's like a 2x store value premium on real estate here in Canada. And stocks, you just look at the historic record highs in PE ratios and valuations of stocks. Sometimes they're like 100x, like 200x. This is historically high. And that all of this just says that like people are aware that the money is worthless, is losing its value, and that over time it's going to continue to lose its value. So they flee the money. They don't save in the money, and they save in other things. They save in other assets. But stocks can be diluted with share issuance, and they're not great stores of value. So it's just people need to continue to understand, like, oh, this is what's happening. Store of value has leaked into crypto and into real estate and into collectibles, like, cardboard and what cars, whatever. Store of value continues to leak there. Bitcoin is a black hole for absorbing excess store of value premium. And that's going to continue because it's the best store of value and it's the most sensical thing to treat as savings and money because it's engineered specifically to be money to hold your value and store your value over time. And once we all kind of agree on that measuring stick, which is going to take 10 years, then it will make sense to redeploy out of Bitcoin once the value of Bitcoin is like appropriate as the perfect money, the perfectly engineered money for the digital age. Then once it's 20 trillion is only 5%. You know, if 20 trillion market cap's only 5% of, say, all the wealth in the world right now, that's probably even cheap. So, you know, $10 million of Bitcoin, that's probably getting to the point where it's like, okay, that's the top. You know, that's the top. 10 million of Bitcoin, that's the top. And then I'm talking about like without the money supply growing to 200 trillion, like it's at 32 trillion or whatever it is right now.
Yeah.
I'm talking about in today's value. But so when we get to that where the proper valuation has been applied into Bitcoin and people are properly storing their money, their store value in Bitcoin, then I could see like, okay, well, now we need to do some yield generation. Now we need to figure out how to redeploy out of Bitcoin back into productive value investment based, you know, thesis. Because if you're not doing value investing, then it's just Ponzi
Mm.
money. You know, it's like Ponzi finance. The world is based off Ponzi finance right now. There's not very much like
Value.
true fundamental value
Value.
in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a lot of what crypto and DeFi is. It's like, what the hell like is it? It's not really that valuable. It's just bubble money.
But Brad, surely there's a place that we can arrive at where we don't have to wait for Bitcoin to get to $10 million or whatever that top might look like, where that value's been absorbed. Surely we can look at utilizing Bitcoin as a store of value long before that in the correct way that you are demanding, which obviously you have a right to. And I completely agree with you. It's kind of like there's got to be that arrival point, and I'm kind of like really despondent that I've got to wait for Bitcoin to get to that level before we can kind of like, you know, utilize it for its true
What do you
true
mean, man? This is crazy. I'm telling you, Bitcoin's going to $1 million a coin. You're like, oh, what? We have to wait until I become so rich that I can
No, it's
afford to
not.
take
That's
my
not what I'm.
Bitcoin and use it.
No, I would like to use Bitcoin as the weapon that it is long before that, as opposed to having to
But
wait
that
for it to
is
go.
the weapon. Like Bitcoin is both a shield and a sword. And it's a shield against debasement of your savings, and it's a sword in that it's taking away power from Ponzi finance and
Gotcha.
from fiat nonsense. So by utilizing Bitcoin as a savings technology, it's like the most productive protest that you could possibly participate in. If you feel like shit is wrong in the world, you don't like the way that, you know, whatever typical social thing is happening that you're pissed off about, save in Bitcoin. And like, don't go out in the street and protest. Like, what is that going to do? That's just going to poison your mind. Save in Bitcoin, invest in your mindset, and like that's you're going to win. I mean, you're going to be more resourced in the future, and you're going to have protected your mindset. You're going to be wealthy, and you're going to have a positive effect on the world because
Mm.
most of the problems in the world can be solved by Bitcoin.
I'm buying more Bitcoin, by the way.
And if you want, like, I'm not saying don't trade, don't get involved in NFTs and DeFi, do whatever you want. Like, obviously, there's opportunity there. There's we're probably going to start printing again soon. They're probably going to print another $20 trillion soon. It seems like Trump and Biden are both embracing crypto, and they're trying to like take a positive stance there. SEC's getting their ass handed to them. I didn't think that was going to happen, but it is. I mean, Wall Street's fully embracing crypto. The money's dying. So, like, here's the way that I look at it. If you have an edge and you think you can make money in crypto because you are willing to spend 80 hours a week figuring it out and like scouring discords and getting in the pre-mints and all that stuff, just invest in yourself. Like, read the book Reminiscences of a Stock Operator, read the book What I Learned Losing $1 Million, I'd read the book Complete Turtle Trader. Like, learn about trend following, learn about risk management, learn that you shouldn't drink the Kool-Aid. You know, that's the number one thing. Don't be a bag holder. Like, no matter what they're telling you about the thing, don't be a bag holder. Your goal is to like increase your wealth, and that's it. I mean, if you're playing this game, like if you're playing a different game, which is financial activism, that's the game. Like I'm in that field more because I love Bitcoin, not just because it's going to make me obscenely wealthy if I hold on to it until it becomes the global reserve asset, but because it also promotes clean energy adoption and because it helps people think better and it helps wake people up about the real problems with the government creating money and inflation and central banking and financial oppression, all these things. I mean, everybody should kind of have a piece of that managing your Bitcoin. Learn about multi-sig, like watch Bitcoin only content creators. So it's no, you can do both. Just you got to draw a line between the two things, I think. I mean, that's just my advice to people is if you're going to be in crypto, you're going to be doing meme coins and trading and DeFi and all that stuff, continually be taking profits out, whether it's 5% or whatever, into a Bitcoin only multi-sig or the BitKey is a perfect little starter multi-sig wallet. Jack Dorsey's company makes it. Cash App, you might have heard of it. Cash
Yep.
App and Square, they got the BitKey now. It's a multi-sig Bitcoin only wallet, super easy, beautiful device. But if you want to get more advanced, you can like set up a cold card or get a Jade wallet or whatever, or even single sig, whatever you need. Just keep your Bitcoin separate from your crypto stuff and continually treat Bitcoin as your savings account. And I'd say just like listen to some Bitcoin podcasts every once in a while. Just don't be filling yourself only with making money, this like short term thinking stuff. Like think long term, understand Bitcoin more, and understand like both. What is Bitcoin? Why you want to hold Bitcoin for a long term from Bitcoin only people who really understand Bitcoin and think about it like primarily. But then also, sure, like learn about your crypto stuff and your uh, Wall Street bets trading or whatever. Like same as an entrepreneur, if you're going to start a business, like yeah, hire a coach, like learn mindset stuff, learn systems and process thinking for your business. It's just like don't treat Bitcoin and crypto the same way because I actually do think, like I said, that we're coming up to a kind of crazy time where the money is dying and like we all kind of know what's going to happen. They're just going to print. They're going to have to, and that's
Yeah.
going to cause assets to go up. And that the SEC is getting their ass handed to them, like I said. So it's like probably you know the likelihood that you can probably, if you are one of those people, that you can actually make some money is probably good right now. For I don't know how long, but just keep it separate and don't take too much risk.
Cool. And I was serious. I am definitely going to go and buy some more Bitcoin. I think
Nice.
from the blockmate side of things, I think there's a lot of guys. I mean, if you follow conversation that we have in our community, it's like Bitcoin's always kind of like the thing that people not only talk about from a market perspective from the gambling side of things, but it's kind of like how much Bitcoin do you have? It's kind of like everyone puts each other on
Right.
the spot. It's like how much Bitcoin do you have? Do you have Bitcoin, bro? Like, are
Yeah,
you
yeah.
actually,
That's funny.
So, and you're right. It's kind of like it's what I was telling you before the podcast. It's like Bitcoin was always something that was very, very close to what it is that I was doing, and kind of like doing all this other stuff and like looking at the possibilities and definitely being guilty of the casino side of things. There's no ways that I can say that I haven't been, but I think that's why we undertook to do more Bitcoin content, is to kind of
That's
like
great, man.
get back to the roots of what the fuck is this, like what are we actually doing here. And I don't know, I feel quite strongly about it. I don't know where this podcast and where this journey is going to take me, but you one of the first that have come on, and I think on that note we can close it off here. I'd love to get you back on um, once I've been through the gauntlet and kind of like maybe I'll become reformed. I'll become hardcore, maybe even more hardcore than you. Not that I think you are hardcore. I think you've got a very balanced, and I think you take things, you are quite light-hearted about it, but obviously it's serious, and I really appreciate the light-hearted side of it because I think a lot of the time, like the Maxi side of things gets a little bit dry and a little bit too serious. Whereas I think you bring both, which is quite important.
Well, I've been
Yeah.
humbled quite a few times by my staunch positions.
Yes.
Like I thought Ethereum was going to be at $500 by next month, and I was wrong. So now Eric Wall has a tungsten cube with my face on it.
Yes.
Um, but I was right about Bitcoin, so at least I got that one right. But I guess, yeah, it's been like I've been in this game for so long, and I've keep my toes in the crypto scene. I have a lot of friends, like good friends that are degens, and like I said, I have a
Yeah.
FOMO sapien side as well. I think the one thing that I might want to leave on
Yes.
is I recognize for myself that I was kind of in the crypto stuff, and it was really like two personalities. I realized it was like I have a Bitcoiner side and a FOMO sapien side. And, I was like addicted to like finding low cap gems and all this shit, right? And I kind of realized last cycle that I think it is an addiction. And some people it is an addiction.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely.
Like
Yes.
I was getting to the point where I was anxious. I was
Yeah.
getting upset with my wife and my daughter when like the littlest thing would happen at home. Like I can't, I gotta mint these freaking JPEGs. Get away from me. It's like freaking getting agitated, and like my mental state was just frenetic, and I I spending way too much time on it. Like I was to the point where I was like physically hurting myself, like reading chats and all this stuff. So
Yeah.
if you can relate with that, I mean, there's a real thing called activity bias too that I realized I had. One of my friends was like, "Dude, you have an activity bias. Like, just go research activity bias."
Yeah.
It's like I know that holding Bitcoin is going to get me to the point where I want. So what I should be doing is just acquiring more Bitcoin. And then if you have an activity bias, you just predilected to just want to continually be doing something to get the value. But what if you could just meditate, exercise, spend time with your family, read books and self-improvement stuff, and then harness Bitcoin's inevitability and just live your life and not have to be on Telegram and Discord for 12 hours a day
Yeah.
and stressed out all the time. Like what if you could have that life? If that sounds appealing to you, maybe you should be a Bitcoin Maxi. Come join me. I have a nice orange robe I can give you. But seriously,
Dude,
like think about
epic.
that. Think
Yeah,
about that.
absolutely.
If anybody's listening and they're like, dude, like, yeah, I think I'm addicted to this. Like, my mom actually, the reason why I'm saying this, my mom has legitimately like an addiction to casinos. Like, she's banned from
Really.
the casinos.
Wow,
She
okay.
gambled my college money, like in this one fit of just gambling stupor, and was like really tough, right? So I
Yeah.
kind of stayed away from casinos. I never felt the urge to play casino games or to gamble on slot machines or anything like that. But then I didn't realize it until like last year. Like I
Doing the
must have
same.
inherited that from her because I was just
Yeah.
doing it with the charts and everything.
Yeah.
So it's like, be aware, just kind of take inventory of how you feel when you're doing this stuff.
Mhm. That's a very good note to close the show off. Brad, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you and get your thoughts. I really do appreciate what you're putting out there. It's what we need. And yeah, to everyone out there, please go and check out Brad's podcast. He has promised through Twitter that he was going to be doing more shows. We're going to hold him to it. Um, and yeah, Magic Internet Money, Brad, pleasure, dude. Thanks so much for coming on. It's been fun. It's been
Thank you.
insightful, and yeah, your energy is much appreciated. And hopefully, we can get you back on. So yeah, take it easy, and thanks for coming.
All right, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please give us a like, subscribe, and turn the notification bell on for next time. See ya.